I want to take a few moments to talk about something that I think we all experience as we make our way through this world and as we develop relationships with other people. I want to talk about energy vampires. That's something that I have seen over the course of my work here with thousands of people, and what I'm about to share with you is very textbook in terms of how people interact with what I call energy vampires. Now, to set the stage, to provide some context, let me tell you something that I've kind of established or picked up on as I made my way through this work. When humans come into a relationship with one another, they develop what are called chords. And while that sounds a little new agey and a little woo woo, that is absolutely what happens to us. We develop chords. We actually will develop these etheric connections between folks. And we develop them with people that we love, and when there's this equal exchange of energy and love, there's not a problem with those chords. We have them with all sorts of folks. And then we can develop very unhealthy attachments and chords to people that are very unhealthy for us. A lot of folks are familiar with the term narcissism or narcissists. Narcissists are a whole different story, and I have seen time and time again people succumb to narcissism, to be gaslit, to be manipulated, to be really abused emotionally, mentally, and sometimes even physically. Let me make a distinction here. All narcissists are energy vampires, but not all energy vampires are narcissists. An energy vampire is somebody who will instigate in you or incite in you a negative emotional reaction. And this negative emotional reaction, it can be fear, it can be worry, it can be rage, it can be jealousy, it can be all sorts of nastiness. And energy vampires aren't necessarily abusers. They could actually be people that just want to take your energy. I've seen a lot of energy vampires that are people that throw pity parties for themselves. They just talk about how awful their life is. They're stuck in this victim complex that, their childhood was awful, their lives are awful, this is awful. And they will share that energy with folks all around them, and they are taking the energy that they get from people's emotional reaction. This is something that happens to all of us. We're going to all come across energy vampires in our lives. Unfortunately, that can have a distinct effect on our well being. Now, I'm going to make some generalizations here, some broad statements. And as I make those generalizations and those broad statements, I know that there are going to be exceptions that prove the rule. So bear with me as I talk about this stuff, because I think that not only can most everybody watching this relate to it, I think folks can absolutely benefit from the wisdom of how to break these connections. So let's say that you come into a relationship with an energy vampire. The narcissists are going to actually be the people that are going to fly under the radar. The best kind of parasite, the best kind of predator is the one that makes sure that you don't know you're being sucked off of, drained from. So you'll come into a relationship with these folks, and the classic example of what I see is a woman and a man. Now, this can happen in homosexual relationships, this can happen with children and parents, but let's go with the woman and the man coming into a relationship. Energy vampires essentially are these people, again, that incite this negative emotional reaction, but time and time again, it is because they had really awful childhoods. They didn't, they weren't cared for, they probably went hungry. There's all sorts of awful stuff that happened to them as a kid, and it's probably because they don't know how to find sustenance or energy elsewhere. This is something that they will do as they get older, feeding off the energy of others, and they don't even realize that they're doing it. But let's go back again to that relationship of the man and the woman. Now, as two people come together, let's say that let's say that everybody has an aura, and everybody does. Everybody has this bioelectromagnetic field that they put off, and that vibrates at a certain frequency, like a radio station. So we have two radio stations coming together in relationship. And as relationships develop and as people fall in love, what is going to happen is those frequencies kind of adjust and they kind of sync up a little bit. Think about the relationships that you have where you can finish other people's sentences. That's what I'm talking about. Now these chords will develop, and then sooner or later these negative emotional reactions are incited in people. And then the woman, generally speaking, because I've seen it in reverse as well, the woman will then get all emotionally riled up, and then she'll feel drained. Riled up, drained. Riled up, drained. And it's a pattern that repeats itself. Unfortunately, what will happen is we have in our dantian, or our chi, or the, I believe it's the sacral chakra, 2 inches below our belly button is where our chi is, our life force. And that's essentially where those cords get connected. Again, I'm going to make a generalization. I am not a medical provider. I don't provide medical advice. But what I have seen time and time again is that as the chi is sucked off of a person, well, we need that electromagnetic energy that's in our body to help us function properly. There's a threshold that gets crossed when that chi gets sucked off. And then what happens is because your energy is so low, you don't have enough energy to maintain what your body needs. You'll see oftentimes a lot of really awful stuff go wrong in the abdomen. Irritable bowel syndrome, urinary tract infections, cysts on your ovaries, just indigestion, stuff doctors can't diagnose. Cords can happen to get connected to our heart center as well. That's where I believe, unfortunately, the number one killer of women is heart disease. Again, not a medical provider, but there is an energetic connection to these centers in our body and the effect and how they overlap with our physical selves. If you're losing all the energy here of this isn't going to be healthy enough to sustain itself. This is why having balanced relations is so important. Unfortunately, when we come under the influence of an energy vampire, we are literally coming under the influence of them. Think of, perhaps you can think of personal experience, or think of people that you watch that have relationships with people that are very similar to alcohol and drug addiction. You know how there are people in this world who have addictions with alcohol or drugs, and they can look right at that bottle of booze, those drugs, and they go, I know it's bad news for me, ooh, but I just can't help myself. This is something that happens when two frequencies join up and then one frequency becomes aligned to the predator. Unfortunately, what will happen is when a person comes into a relationship like this, they will then find, if they're lucky enough to get rid of their narcissist or their energy vampire, they'll find that those people keep coming back to them. Because over here, the person that has been affected or fallen under the influence of an energy vampire, well, their energy signature kind of not switches, but shifts to, and I hate this word, but it's the best word to lean into when using this example, their energy shifts more to prey, more to a doormat. People just, these predators just know that they can take and take and take and take. That's why you'll find most people who have been in these relationships will attract these people over and over again. Now, for all that being said, there is hope. If you have an energy vampire or a narcissist in your life, I want you to think of it as if you're battling a addiction. I want you to think of it as that. That's a very difficult battle for people to fight. And yet, we can become addicted to people that are unhealthy for us, just due to the nature of that energetic connection and what that does to us. You can absolutely rid yourself of narcissism. You can rid yourself of energy vampires, and actually, it's quite important that you do for your health, for your well-being. I want to give you the tools that I believe people can use to help remove themselves from the clutches of these nasty narcissists and energy vampires. The first the first method that I would always recommend to folks is this. Take a salt bath. Take a salt bath. Now, this is sea salt, not Epsom salt, but sea salt. Remember how I mentioned that bioelectromagnetic field? Well, if you take a salt bath and you cleanse that part of your system right here, wash it really good. The idea of saging and smudging an area to get rid of negative energy in a space, we can hold on to negative energy in our auric field. We can hold on to those sorts of emotional imprints, and we can hold on to these cords. These cords can actually be long lived. You cannot talk to a person for years and they're still connected. That person can be across the world and they're still connected. A salt bath is actually so useful and cutting those cords. And that's the first step. And in fact, that's the easiest step in this. I'll give you an example. I just had a client that this happened to. And as soon as I started giving her a reading, I'm like, oof, you've got something bad happening with you. And again, and it was right on. She had just broken up with the narcissist and she was struggling with it as, somebody who struggles with drugs or alcohol would struggle after breaking free from that addiction. So I had to, tell her this, exactly what I'm sharing here, how this stuff works with human relations. Now, salt bath is so vital to that. Then, on top of that, it doesn't stop there. It's like the alcoholic who must be aware that certain scenes or places will trigger them. An alcoholic, whether a dry alcoholic, somebody who's not drinking but has alcoholism, has to be mindful of not going into bars, has to be mindful of open bars at weddings. There's certain things that are going to trigger them that they have to be mindful of. If you've had a narcissist or an energy vampire attached to you and you've successfully dislodged them, you have to be aware that that could happen to you again. It's just one of those things. Now, the other, the most successful way to get rid of an energy vampire is this, yet I will share this with you. It is absolutely the hardest. I'm going to ask a question, and I've asked this to a lot of people, so you might already know the answer to this. What is the opposite of love? What's the opposite of love? Most people are going to say hate, and it's not. Hate is not the opposite of love. Hate is a very intense emotional process that we go through. The opposite of love is in fact the opposite of hate. The opposite of love and hate is indifference. Now, once you disconnect from your energy vampire or your narcissist, they will sense it on an energetic level and they will come at you. This client of mine who had this exact textbook scenario had this happen to them, and I said, take the bath, but what you need to know is that once you cut that cord, that person's going to sense it, that person's going to sense their lack of nourishment, and they're going to reach out to you. And this person, like clockwork, did this. They took the bath, they cut that cord, and that night they received a text message from their ex asking them a question. And I had to stress to them, zero contact, zero contact. Because that cord will reestablish itself when you have an emotional reaction. If you see that person's face, if you hear that person's voice, if you have an emotional reaction of anger, lust, rage, jealousy, anything like that around that person, boom, cord is connected and you're giving that person your energy. The best way for you to manage a narcissist or an energy vampire is zero contact, just like with alcoholism, and you must become indifferent to them. In that way, that person must die. The person must not absolutely be anything to you. You must do the best you can to have zero emotional reaction to that person. Again, the hardest thing that I think that we ever have to manage. I had a significant narcissist in my life, and that person did everything they can to do exactly what I referenced here. I was only free when I had zero emotional attachment or reaction around that person or my time spent with that person. Unfortunately, they'll just go find somebody else to do this to. That's not your story. You do not remain connected to this person just in hopes that they won't do it to other people. Another textbook piece of this relationship is that they will do it to as many people as they can. Think of a really nasty octopus sitting on the shoulders of this person in an etheric sense, and they just stick tentacle and tentacle and tentacle and tentacle into coworkers, into exes, into people that they're cheating on their loved ones with. I mean, it's just awful, insidious, and toxic, but that's not your story. Your responsibility is to take care of yourself, keep yourself healthy, and keep yourself well. Just remember everything that I mentioned here and maintain zero contact and zero emotional response. If you can manage that, just like a bully, they'll find somewhere else to go. Take care of yourselves, and if you have any questions about this, please, of course, let me know.